Okay, so we're going to pick up from our last session here with a question that God asks Adam. And then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, "Where are you? Where are you?" The way I'm seeing this question, though specific to a moment in time, given its placement in the Bible in the midst of an explanation of our human condition, I think this question is part of that framework. Among other things, it's the invitation to an examined life. For this reason, I think the resonance of this interrogative appears throughout the Old Testament. From the either or dialectics of Proverbs, inside looks at the families of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the kings, David, and the rest. The call of the prophets to the nation of Israel always seem to have the same underlying focus: to search out and see the reality of where they were in relation to God and to those around them. Jesus expands this further in the sermon when he lifts this focus beyond looking at external behavior and invites deeper introspection as a cultural norm. Another way of saying it is taking responsibility for thoughts and motivations, as well as our actions. You can hide in good behavior. This was precisely Jesus' objection to the religious leaders. It makes the point that God really cares not so much about what we have or how we appear. Rather, he wants to get to the bottom of who we are when no one else is watching. In order to cultivate that kind of personal reality, you have to look for it. That process is brilliantly captured in the simple phrase, "Where are you?" Not so much for the phrase itself, but the context in which it's asked. Now, one of the realizations that led me to understand the nature of pride grew out of work I've done in 12 steps, particularly working with newcomers in the Back to Basics movement. We present the program in 4 one-hour sessions like they did back in AA in the 40s. I've worked through the steps many times with groups of newcomers and individuals. A couple of important things stand out to me from that experience. The way I came to understand pride has a great deal to do with what someone becomes willing to do to manage or enhance their reputation. Most of us have heard this expression, "It's time to face the music." Well, now, there's a supposed backstory to this. A wealthy landowner was a music lover, but he really couldn't play. Yet he managed to persuade the conductor of the local orchestra to let him sit in and appear to play. People would compliment him on how wonderful a musician he was. He felt so good about himself and he enjoyed this distinguished reputation. However, the day came when the old conductor retired. The town hired a new music director to lead the orchestra. Now, this new fellow decided that he wanted to audition each musician personally to evaluate them. When the time came for the wealthy landowner to play for the new conductor, he didn't show up. He couldn't actually play the instrument, so when it came time to face the music, he balked. False pride, when we seek a reputation based on a fictitious premise which gets us something we want, is, in 12-step terms, a character defect. In Christian theology, it is simply referred to as sin. I want to point out that the wealthy landowner's disposition towards his community is really at the heart of the matter. What they thought of him was more important to him than who he actually was. and what kind of contribution he was making to the society around him. There it is again, the where are you question. But it gets even stranger than this. Self-pity and self-deprecation can also be forms of false pride. Among some addicts, there's a perverse compulsion to think too little of themselves. In some cases, it's actually part of the addiction. It's a self-driven narrative about how they want other people to see them or how they see themselves. It's often brought about by trauma. So they are, in effect, managing their reputation toward a self-seeking and self-protective end. But more specifically, they're hiding from life, from other people and responsibility, because who they are, their real gifts or talents, are kept hidden. Now, we probably all know someone like this. Now, not all of them can be classified as addicts either, but we don't often think of it in terms of false pride. However, we will see that such a disposition erodes relationships. Endeavoring to have others think of us in a particular way, high or low, that's the heart of the matter. We become offset from the reality of ourselves and our circumstances. We want to convince ourselves, or others, of where we are divergent from our true disposition. Something where most people are familiar with, Bernie Madoff, the perpetrator of the largest Ponzi scheme in history, is an example of just how far this can go and just how much damage it can do. Now, the wealthy landowner in our previous example who couldn't face the music got off without providing a contribution. His was a false pride. It had no basis in anything that he did. He was hiding among the trees in the garden. To go back to our Genesis picture here. Now, let's take it into another part of the spectrum there. If he'd been an exceptional player and lorded it over his fellow orchestra members, that too would have been a problem. That's the more common form of pride we know. The rest of the orchestra members having to put up with his arrogance would erode relationships. The self-aggrandized disposition, placing himself as better than the others, harms the unity of the orchestra. Sports coaches know this. A self-obsessed superstar player undermines team morale. The best player is the one who excels in concert with the other players. Jesus addresses the issue of reputation in the 6th chapter of Matthew. He implicitly poses the question, where are you, throughout the entire sermon. His focus is not how you look on the outside to those around you. He's concerned about a person's true disposition, where they are in relation to that other person, regardless of what's seen or how they behave. And this goes beyond the mere acknowledgement of our motives or intentions, because for many reasons it is difficult to fully comprehend our own inner life. That's revealed in the context of our relationships. We discover it along the way. Through our interactions, we get to observe where we are. King David, knew this very well when in Psalm 139 he begs, "Search me, O God." The fearless and thorough moral inventory of a 4th step dispels our rationalizations about where we are with other people by coming to terms with where we actually are at the time of the events on our grudge lists. And look, everybody's got a grudge list. Whether they admit it or not, they do. Things that didn't go right, that they hold against other people, or sometimes against themselves. The secret that we don't often say about 4th steps is it's also seeing where we're actually right with God and with others and ourselves. Sometimes our disposition towards others or ourselves are aligned very well with reality. Now this is why I love the way Bill W. puts it. It's like a business inventory to determine what is saleable and what's not. Put in the sermon nomenclature what is good fruit and what is not. As it turns out, we all end up being a mix of both. The pursuit of a spiritual life, at least on our part, is in great measure realigning our disposition toward God, ourselves, and others in our thoughts, decisions, and actions. Even when our circumstances appear to be really good, as Jesus reminded the church of Laodicea about the numbing effect of wealth and success, he says in Revelation 3:17, because you say, I am rich, and have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. This picture fits all too well with our modern age. We can be far more at risk than we let ourselves know. And then, two, the very cross of Christ drives home just how vulnerable we truly are. What better picture of our true condition than the Son of Man, stripped of all that we depend on in this life, exposed in shame before his enemies, abandoned by those he loved, hung defenseless before all that is hostile in this world. The wretched destination of our pride, our sin, our dysfunction, our misalignment, whatever you want to call it, with God and with others, inevitably leads us, if not literally, then at least in our hearts and minds, that's brutally on display. Here's the good news, though. God made a way through the depravity and death humankind was and is heir to. The kingdom is at hand. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.